My family doesn't eat meat after 6 p.m. I'd always thought this was normal, and that other families follow this seemingly basic principle. It wasn't until I moved out that I learned how weird of a thing this was. That other families didn't adhere to what I had always thought to be a fundamental dietary guideline. Only my family believed in the consequences. For nearly 2 decades, I refrained from eating meat after the clock struck 6, regardless of how much of a craving I happened to have for it. Even if there was plenty left, and I hadn't finished my plate, I was expected to either scrape the remains into the trash, so much food wasted, or put them in a Tupperware container for the next day. I always tried to get home soon enough to eat dinner before then, but with school and extracurricular activities, that wasn't always possible. I remember when I just finished hosting a session for an after-school club and was on my way home. Starving, hadn't eaten all day, when I got a text from my father saying that he had bundled all the meat up and to not expect any left out. He'd sent the text at 5:47 p.m. I arrived home feeling disappointed, but quickly got over it as it was simply something that had to be done. It was, for us, normal. The fear of consequences guided our lives. Because of how integral it was to my family, I had never once brought up the topic with friends, much like how you probably wouldn't bring up the fact that you put your dishes in the sink or dishwasher. It was never conversationally relevant to bring up our no meat after 6 rule. To me, it was mundane and unremarkable. It might sound like this was an odd, though ultimately harmless restriction. A familial eccentricity, which many families have in one way or another. And in one way, you're right, I wasn't abused. I slipped up once, and while it was treated gravely, given a stern though not frighteningly heated warning, there was no traumatic punishment, physical or otherwise. There was some leniency in the execution of consequence with regards to children. But the consequence itself was so utterly bizarre, so needlessly grim, that its very existence made the whole thing unforgivable. I would have rather been raised vegan and lived a life bereft of meat for some allegedly noble cause than the one I had, because that knowledge, that ever-lurking fear, messed me up in other ways. I don't have PS, and neither do I have some psychological block preventing me from eating meat after 6 p.m. Thank God, but I do have knowledge of the consequence, and I'd do anything to forget it. When I shared that knowledge with my girlfriend and how I still adhered to it, something she hadn't consciously noticed, she left me. And not only did she leave me, she called me a lunatic. Me, who had never once said anything certifiably crazy. Me, who treated her with care, respect, and kindness, with an unblemished record of staunch sanity. All because of the fucking consequences. She left yesterday, and in doing so, she took all of her things from my apartment, which included most of the cookware since she brought hers over in the absence of my own. I'd relied on the microwave and an air fryer prior to her moving in, back to such lowly states. I bought a Hot Pocket after an unusually exhausting day at work, that olden dinner upon which many have relied throughout the ages. Cheeseburger flavor. Additionally, I bought a bag of those low-fat, air-fried chicken tenders to supplement the totally nutritious meal. I was physically tired and emotionally wrecked. I guess, in the grief of my heartbreak, I thought it worthwhile to share the events with my cousin during the drive home, with whom I'd always felt a close brotherly connection. Well, he apparently felt it was necessary to tell my parents after the call ended, who took it upon themselves to come visit me. While sitting at my small dinner table eating my Hot Pocket and tendies, there came a few knocks at the door to my apartment. I got up, answered, and, bewildered, let my parents in. My mom hugged me, and my dad gave me a knowing and solemn pat on the shoulder, and told me in many words that I'd be fine, and that I'd find someone better. Absent-mindedly, I brought them into the kitchen and offered them some tenders since I'd cooked the whole bag. I hadn't paid attention to the time. Ironically, I hadn't thought of the one that had ended my relationship. My mom's face was the first to change. It went from sympathetically despondent to confused, and then to horrified. My dad's reaction was a little belated, as if he couldn't quite fathom the events. His expression of fatherly contrition slowly melted into a snarl, a visage of mounting contempt. Finally, glancing over at the microwave's clock, I realized what I'd done. Speechless, my mother merely stood at the threshold of the kitchen. My father, equally voiceless, gently pushed past her and headed toward the front door. I heard the lock click, and then he returned, his face grimly set, beat, resolute. Stunned, I sat there at the table, the cheap meat churning in my gut, my plate. The half-eaten hot pocket and chicken tender crumbs suddenly seemed like a profane thing. I wanted to sweep it off the table. After guiding my mother to a seat, my father went and leaned against the kitchen counter, his hands clasped together. He looked like a pastor in prayer, his posture almost reverent. A terrible, baleful silence fell upon the kitchen, like the sudden hush of an audience before a public execution. Oh, my son, my baby. My mother's shaky voice almost broke me. I met her eyes and she averted them. She couldn't bear to look at me, her own son. I tried to apologize, but my mouth was suddenly dry. The room suddenly felt hot and stifling. I couldn't seem to breathe, let alone form the words. Slowly, things started to feel wrong. Anxiety reared itself like a massive wave. My vision swam. Objects became blurred, indistinct, and amorphous. My own parents became like phantoms, shifting and immaterial. I gripped the table for balance and stability, as if I were the one losing corporeality. It's happening. To my son. Oh my God. I'd never heard my father sound so defeated. His voice almost brought me back, almost reversing the nauseating unreality of my sudden affliction. In my mounting delirium, my mother's whimpering sounded almost musical. Sing-song. Like a lullaby, she'd whisper sing to me as a child. When I felt my face begin to slide free from my skull, I screamed, but it was altered and distorted as my lips came loose. My tongue followed in their wake. As if taking on the burden, my mother let out a scream of her own. To me, the world was now no more than a kaleidoscopic maelstrom of images, one of which was my maniacally shrieking mother. The rest of my body fell apart in turn. Bits crumbled away, layers sloughed off, and fluids leaked and oozed. When there was finally just my skeleton, held together by strips and stubborn sinew, my father began cleaning up the mess. My mother's mind was pretty much gone. She'd screamed herself senseless, unable to move and lacking the connective tissue to do so. I just sat and watched as my remains were collected and deposited into a bucket he'd gotten from beneath my sink. The stuff, the meat, was then slowly poured into the sink. The grinding and gurgling of the garbage disposal as it worked to break up my flesh somehow calmed me. It would have soothed my nerves if I'd still had them. When the deed was done, he lifted my bony hand and placed it gently on the table, then did the same with the other. I could only watch. My eyes hadn't withered away. He then shuffled around the kitchen and, not finding what he was looking for, he went searching throughout the apartment. I couldn't guide him, not that I would, but he found it eventually. He set the toolbox on the kitchen table as if it were the most delicate thing in the world. It was old. It had been his. But it was sturdy, and the tools inside hadn't been used once since he'd gifted them to me. With both hands, as if there were precious jewels inside, he raised the lid and removed the hammer and a few nails. He raised the hammer, then lowered it and helped my mother out of her chair. He led her to my couch and returned, his expression pained but set. He was ready, no matter how much it would hurt him, and me. A nail was placed on my left hand. The hammer struck once, twice. A second nail was placed on my right hand and embedded in its head with 3 solid, table-shaking strikes. There was, somehow, pain. All that was left of me was bone, and some flimsy pieces of dead flesh, and somehow I felt it. More than just a vibration. I actually felt the puncturing of the bone and the fracturing of my hand. Some phantom skin sensations. Affixed to the table in a seated crucifixion, I was a prisoner. I knew that I had every right to be, given what I'd done. What I'd do if I were free. And yet I was terrified, appalled, by my father's eyes, by what I had become, by what he'd done to me without so much as a few calming words. The stink of my discarded ground flesh lingered and wafted up the garbage disposal, the viscera still clinging to the pipes. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream, but I could only stare and suffer. And then the urge came, insidious and powerful. Like a switch had been flipped in my brain. The newly emergent psyche demanded that I perform the unthinkable. It galvanized me. I made my bones pulse and quiver. They rattled in place, and I heard my mother moan in fright. My father sat across from me, watching me with a hammer in hand, and I, torn between minds, one terrified, the other unthinking save for that deplorable impulse. Started back, that abysmal silence returned. When my skin began to grow back, the urge increased by magnitudes. I nearly lost myself completely to that abominable impulse. My parents left around the time that my face finished reconstituting itself. It felt new, so I'm sure it looked incredibly uncanny, probably more unnerving than the skeleton they'd stared at for nearly an hour. I thought I'd die when the skin formed around my hands. When those new nerves, excited to sense and feel, were unfairly bombarded by the sudden, inexpressibly excruciating sensation of those long nails in my hands, I let my mind fold into myself. I withdrew into an unthinking fog. Even after I'd finished regenerating, I sat there for 23 minutes. I was dreading to rip out the nails, to bring even greater agony upon myself. But I had to, and I did. Thank God I didn't have the voice for the pain, and that my vocal cords hadn't yet grown taut enough to handle the sonic burden. I would have brought the whole complex running to my door with my screams. I know that had my father not done that, I would have done far worse to someone else, as something worse than a ghoul, as some kind of fleshless revenant. I would have gone on a monstrous prowl. I would have seized and devoured someone. Long ago, centuries before my birth, some far distant ancestor committed atrocities against a few fellow townspeople in some long-forgotten village, either out of extreme desperation in dire circumstances or simple sadistic gluttony. I never found out why. I just know that he committed terrible anthropophagic crimes, cannibalized multiple people. The people related to those he'd hurt were so devastated and subsequently filled with wrath that they employed all manner of curses and maledictions, dooming him and his kin, forever and ever, to unforeseeable and unpreventable malignancies and restrictions, consequences related to the consumption of meat. Not long after, an entire generation was rendered gastrointestinally incompatible with meat. Others down the line had been able to eat and not get full, no matter the quality or content. I don't think I could have lived with that polyphagic plague. Not for long. My family, our consequence. For whatever reason, we cannot eat meat after 6 p.m., lest we shed our flesh and transform into hyper-ravenous fiends, skeletal nightmares who'd prey on friends, foes, or family in a frenzy of insatiable hunger, unless we're detained and starved for a period of time dependent upon factors seemingly beyond our control. As I got on the elevator, the man getting off whispered something strange to me. "Don't get off until you hit the 9th floor. No exceptions." "But my interview is on the 5th, I replied. "I'll only say this one more time. Don't get off until you hit 9. No other floor is safe." It's crazy, but something about the way he said it penetrated my skull. He was serious, and he looked nervous,
like he had to fight every instinct in his body to say that to me. The doors closed, while I thought to myself, who the fuck says anything like that? As I went to hit the button for the 5th floor, some anxiety came over me. I shook it off and pressed it. The guy was probably just off his rockers. The elevator went up. I scanned my surroundings. A TV bolted to the top corner of the elevator, playing the Weather Channel, a mirror for the back wall of the elevator, and some cozy lounge-style music playing. Pretty standard stuff. Now arriving at the 5th floor. Weird. Not sure if I'd ever been in an elevator that announced which floor it was arriving at. I was sure that if I worked in this building, it would get pretty old quickly. Ding. The doors opened at 5. In front of me was a reception area with a woman seated at the front desk. She stood up from her seat. "Mr. Davis, you're early." The gentleman's warning from earlier played in my head. "We'll be ready for your interview in a few moments. In the meantime, please feel free to take a seat." "Ooh, thank you," I responded. "If I'm early, maybe I can come back in a few minutes." "Nonsense. We'll see if we can speed things up. He's been very excited to meet you." The elevator doors started closing. I held them open. I wasn't sure what to do here, but everything seemed fine enough. Granted, the receptionist did seem a bit eager, but beyond that, from my vantage point, I scanned the office space behind the front desk area. All looked normal. Cubicles, folks clicking away at their computers, a kitchen area. Pretty unremarkable. That is, except for the portrait off at the far end of the office floor. It was very large. I couldn't tell what the picture was of, but I did see a group of employees staring at it, almost admiring it. "Your wife's name is Meredith, right?" I froze as the receptionist's question shot a dart right through me. I didn't remember the job application form ever asking for my wife's name. "You two are thinking of having children, right? If it's a boy, you want to name him Sam?" Before I could answer, the office workers surrounding the large portrait started singing the happy birthday song loudly, in complete and perfect unison. Someone brought out a birthday cake and presented it to the portrait. A portrait that, after a bit of squinting, I realized was a very large version of my high school yearbook photo. I backed into the elevator and pressed the closed door button. I panicked as it took its sweet time to register. Press, press, press. Come the fuck on. After what felt like an eternity, the doors started closing. "I'm so curious to know what your insides taste like, Michael." Hell no. 9th floor. I needed to go to the 9th floor. I found the 9th floor button and pressed it. It felt like it didn't register my push, so I pressed the button again. And again. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, 9th fucking floor. I tried again and again, but nothing was happening. Fuck it. I'll go back to the ground floor, I thought to myself. Back to the start. As I went to press the GG button, I realized it was missing. Just that one singular button is gone. Fuck. I was getting claustrophobic. I took deep breaths to prevent myself from having a full-blown episode. The elevator started moving up again. A panel above the elevator doors lit up with the following number: 11. Someone was calling the elevator. I started talking to myself to self-soothe. It's okay. Someone will call the 9th floor soon. That's where I'll get off. As the elevator approached its new destination, I noticed that the background lounge music in the elevator had changed. It was now an instrumental arrangement of Happy Birthday. I'm not sure why this thing thought it was my birthday. I glanced at the weather report on the TV. At least it was going to be sunny all week. Silver linings. Now arriving at the 11th floor. Ding. The doors opened, and I hung around the inside corner of the elevator beside the buttons. There's no need to have another nightmare-ish experience, right? An old woman stepped onto the elevator. Great. I'm sure this will be easy to explain to her. She smiled at me as the doors closed. With a lump in my throat, I asked, "What floor?" "Ground floor, please." I'm sorry, Mom, but that button is missing. Maybe we could wait until someone calls us to the 9th floor." "Ninth? No. I think I'll just go to the 2nd floor instead." She went to press the button. "Mom, I don't think it'd be safe to—" "I have plenty of friends on the 2nd floor. It'll be okay." And she pressed it. I didn't feel comfortable cornering an elderly stranger in a seemingly haunted elevator, but I tried again to convince her. "I know this sounds weird, but I have it under good authority that the 2nd floor probably isn't safe. I'd strongly recommend not getting off until we reach 9. She smiled. "Dear, it'll be all right. You know, I like to take all the opportunities that are given to me. It's a shame that you turned your opportunity down. I know the folks on 5 are very disappointed." I backed up into the corner of the elevator. I saw the reflection of the old lady in the elevator's back mirror. She looked ghastly. Now arriving at the 2nd floor. The doors opened. She smiled at me again and then exited. I poked my head around the corner to look at the 2nd floor. It was damp. It looked old, more like a cave than an office. I heard a low rumble. A man dressed in a fancy suit approached the elevator doors and held them open before they could close. The doors opened. I scanned the new floor and I realized I was back on the ground floor. That's what it looked like anyway. Did I escape? Was I finally free? A man stood not too far from the door. He looked familiar, but I couldn't exactly place him. "Hey man," he spoke. Was this the guy who got off the elevator just as I got on? Hey. "It's over, man. You got out," he told me. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I had to fight it. "But you said the 9th floor was the only safe one, right?" "That was a trick. You followed your gut, and you were right. 20, 3rd floor. The real safe floor. You can step out now, man." I didn't leave. "There's someone here who really wants to see you." I couldn't move. "He wants to give you a job. He thinks you're going to be great." Why the fuck couldn't I move? "He's in the other room. I'm going to fetch him, okay? All you have to do is look at him. It'll feel a bit weird at first, but then it'll all be okay. It's a permanent position. Great benefits. It is fully on site, but there is no better birthday present than a new job. Right?" I lowered my gaze to the floor. I forced myself to mutter the following words. "It's not my fucking birthday." As he left to fetch, whoever he was meaning to fetch, he gave me the following response. "Relax, man. No cursing on the job. We're family here." It felt like I could only move a centimeter at a time. A true snail's pace. I inched my finger closer and closer to the closed door button. I heard footsteps. He was coming back. With every fiber of my being, I pushed through. The doors closed and I collapsed to the floor, free from whatever weird force was stopping me from moving. "I'll let you two talk more on the elevator," I heard him say, from outside the doors. What? Instinctively, I looked around. To my surprise, there was nothing. A lengthy exhale. I was done with all of this. At this point, I would have taken death over continuing this bullshit any longer. As I pondered my next move in this hopeless situation, I noticed something strange. The button to the 9th floor was lit up, an ominous crimson-red color. Before I could do anything else, my phone started ringing. I checked the call. It was my wife. I answered. "Babe, fuck. I don't know why I didn't even think to call you. I'm trapped in an elevator, and fucked up shit is happening. Maybe I should call the cops. Hun, don't go to the 9th floor." What? Wait, how do you even? It's a trick, honey. You have to trust me. The man from before was lying to you. It's not safe. None of this has been safe. How do you even know everything that's happening? You just need to trust me, hun. I paused. So, what do you want me to do then? A demon on the other side of the phone answered this time. Go to your interview. I hung up the call, and in a panic, I mashed on the 9th floor button. The elevator started rising again. Even with me hanging up the call, the muffled sound of the demonic voice coming from my phone continued. Go to your interview. Go to your interview. Go to your interview. I pulled out my phone and flung it to the ground as hard as I could. I stomped on it angrily. The warped sound of go to your interview slowly started dying out. But suddenly, the elevator started shaking. It was continuing to go up, but it was faster than usual. Really, really fucking fast all of a sudden. It was almost like the 9th floor was now way below me. It felt like an amusement park ride with no brakes. Loose. Dangerous. It was flying up at an insane speed, almost as if it were falling upwards. But I pressed 9, I screamed to myself, exasperated. It didn't matter. Now arriving at the 41st floor. God, what the fuck? I was brought to my knees by the speed of the elevator, which traveled faster and faster. Now arriving at 90th floor. The buttons didn't even go past 52. Now arriving at the 141st floor. Now arriving at the 230th floor. Now arriving at the 401st floor. I felt like I was inside a bullet. The pleasant voice of the elevator lady was getting deeper and deeper as we rose. Now arriving at the 840th floor. The voice started croaking, a demonic sound this time. Now arriving at someplace. Nice. A sudden halt. The elevator stopped. The doors didn't open though. The panel above the elevator doors had no indication of what floor we were on. As I sat, I heard what could be best described as the sounds of hell coming from outside the elevator. Low grunts of pain, crackling, a dark hymn. Was this where I was supposed to get off? Before I could ponder the question further, I heard a soft tapping on the elevator, a voice from outside. Do you want to trade? Said the voice. I decided to bite, for reasons I still don't fully understand. What do you mean? What if you stay on this floor forever, and I get to go home? I think I'm good, but I really want to go home. It almost sounded like the voice of a kid. Fucking hell. I'm sorry, kid, I mustered back. It's okay. There was an awkward silence between us. He told me that he wants to wish you a happy birthday, said the kid. I think he's got it wrong. Today isn't my birthday. It is, he responded. It's the first day of your new life, your birthday. He wants you to look at the TV. What? I looked at the TV in the top corner of the elevator, hoping to see the one constant I'd had during this whole cursed trip, the weather. Instead, the TV was now showcasing what looked to be CCTV footage, grainy footage from a camera of the exact elevator I was in, a live feed of this exact moment. Except the TV showed me lying down. I looked up with a wide smile on my face, and something above me on the ceiling, looking straight down at me. Him. The lights in the elevator went off. The elevator plummeted downward as I closed my eyes and screamed for dear fucking life. I waited for the impact. What I knew was my demise. Here it comes. Here it fucking comes. I'm not ready. I'm not ready at all. Now arriving at the 9th floor. Ding. The doors opened. Wait, what? 9th floor? I peeked out of the elevator. Another reception desk. Wait, is this really the... I was interrupted by a voice from the outside. You coming out or what, you fucking moron? I got to my feet. The feeling of distrust, anxiety, whatever you'd call it. I felt light. Fuck it. I stepped onto the floor and approached the counter. The receptionist handed me what looked like a button for the elevator. For the ground floor, she said. Single use only. I took it and headed towards the elevator. Then I turned back to face her. Can I maybe take the stairs? She shook her head. If you didn't like the elevator, then you're really not going to like the stairs. Fair enough. I got into the elevator. I said a silent prayer to myself and I put the button where it belonged. It fit without any issues. I pressed it and the elevator went down. Now arriving at the ground floor. Ding. As I got ready to exit, I realized that the ground floor button was missing once again. Strange. I didn't linger on it. I marched out, ready to get the fuck out of this building. I noticed a woman running onto the elevator. I tried to stop her, but something in my body wouldn't let me. The most I could muster was putting my hand on the door to relay a message to her before the doors closed. Don't get off until you reach the 9th floor, no matter what. The woman just smiled at me. Happy birthday, Michael.